The year is 1307. The chill of an October dawn sweeps across France. In the dim light, armored men ride through the mist toward stone fortresses, clutching secret orders sealed with the royal crest. Their mission: arrest every Knight Templar they can find. By the next sunrise, one of the most powerful military orders in Christendom is in chains. The knights who once guarded kings and pilgrims now stand accused of heresy, corruption, and even devil worship. But was this the righteous fall of a corrupted brotherhood, or one of the greatest betrayals in medieval history? To understand the truth, we need to go back 2 centuries, to the dusty roads of Jerusalem, where the legend of the Knights Templar began. When Christian armies captured Jerusalem in 1099 during the First Crusade, pilgrims from across Europe flocked to the Holy Land. But the roads were treacherous, filled with bandits and remnants of war. In 1119, a small band of 9 knights, led by a French nobleman named Hugues de Payan, made a vow. They would dedicate their lives to protecting travelers journeying to the sacred city. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. It was a humble name for men who had nothing: no wealth, no lands, and no political power. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, living in the ruins of Solomon's temple on Jerusalem's Temple Mount. That's where they got the name we remember today, the Knights Templar. But humility would not last long. Within a decade, they caught the attention of the most powerful man in the Catholic world, Bernard of Clairvaux, a revered abbot who saw divine purpose in their mission. With his blessing and a papal endorsement from Pope Honorius II, the Templars were transformed from obscure monks into the Pope's own soldiers. They could cross borders freely, were exempt from taxes, and answered to no king, only the Pope himself. What began as a small band of protectors soon became a global organization. The Templars established castles and commanderies stretching from England to the Holy Land. Their red cross became a symbol both feared and respected. In battle, they were unstoppable, charging in tight formation, refusing to retreat even when outnumbered. Muslim chroniclers describe them as lions in war. Yet while their swords won them fame, it was their money that gave them power. The Templars became the medieval world's first international bankers. Pilgrims could deposit money in one Templar commandery in Europe and withdraw it safely in Jerusalem. The order stored fortunes for kings and nobles, financed wars, and even managed estates. Their wealth was staggering, so much so that one chronicler wrote, "They had more gold than God himself." But with wealth comes envy, and with power, suspicion. By the late 1200s, the tide of history turned against them. The Crusader states fell one by one. In 1291, the last Templar stronghold in the Holy Land, Acre, was lost to Muslim forces. Those who survived returned to Europe, stripped of purpose but still immensely rich. And in France, one man was watching them closely: King Philip IV. Philip was a ruler consumed by debt. Wars and ambition had emptied his treasury, and much of what he owed was to the Templars. To him, they were no longer holy warriors. They were a rival power, untouchable and immensely wealthy. Then came the plan that would destroy them. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, a date that still echoes with superstition, Philip ordered the simultaneous arrest of every Templar in France. He accused them of heresy, blasphemy, and worshipping a mysterious idol known as Baphomet. The charges were shocking: spitting on the cross, denying Christ, and engaging in secret rituals. Under torture, many confessed to impossible crimes. Some retracted their confessions only to be tortured again. The papacy, under immense pressure, eventually dissolved the order. And then came the fire. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, was burned alive in 1314 on an island in the Seine River. Witnesses say he shouted his innocence to the very end, cursing both the Pope and the King, summoning them to stand before God's judgment within a year. Legend says both men were dead within months. It's a story filled with betrayal, vengeance, and mystery. But what's the truth behind the accusations? Most historians now agree. The Templars were victims of political greed, not heresy. The so-called confessions were wrung out under brutal torture. The idol of Baphomet was likely a mistranslation or invention, a weapon of propaganda. Yet, some questions still linger. Why were their records destroyed? What happened to their vast treasure, which seemed to vanish overnight? Did some Templars escape to Scotland or Portugal, where they quietly rebranded themselves as new orders, like the Knights of Christ, continuing their legacy in secret? Even centuries later, the Templars live on in myths, novels, and conspiracy theories. They've been linked to everything from the Holy Grail to Freemasonry. But perhaps the most fascinating truth is simpler and far more human. The Knights Templar began as protectors of the innocent, but as they rose in power, they became entangled in the same web of ambition, politics, and greed that consumed medieval Europe. Their fall was not just the end of a brotherhood, it was a warning about what happens when faith, power, and money become indistinguishable. When Jacques de Molay faced the flames, he refused to beg for mercy. He did not scream or curse. Instead, he asked to face Notre Dame Cathedral as he died, staring at the towers that once symbolized everything his order had fought for. Whether you see him as a martyr or a rebel, his last words still echo across the centuries, an oath of defiance against the powers that destroyed him. Let all who are unjust suffer as we suffer. God knows who is wrong and has judged already. And perhaps somewhere in those words lies the real story of the Knights Templar. Not as saints, not as villains, but as men, caught between devotion and desire, faith and fire.